Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's PhRMA Foundation webinar, How to Write a Standout Letter of Intent and Application. What I'm going to do today is give you a brief overview of the PhRMA Foundation, introduce our speaker, and then moderate a question and answer session. My name is Amy Miller. I'm president of the PhRMA Foundation, and I'm happy to host you today. For those of you who don't know the PhRMA Foundation, we foster biomedical innovation by catalyzing careers of young people. And we value innovation, collaboration, and our research and our award selection process is scientifically independent. By the numbers, over the course of our career, we've given away about $110 million to about 2,700 early career researchers at about 300 different US-based institutions. We do allow international students to compete for our grants, but they must be matriculating at a US-based institution. What do we fund? We fund health outcomes research and value assessment research, translational medicine, drug delivery and drug discovery research. And although the focus of our conversation today is on discovery primarily, what our speaker today has to say really does apply to all of our grant programs, and dare I say, other grant programs as well. For clarity, here is how we define our drug discovery and drug delivery programs. This information is available on our website. Who do we fund? In these two categories, drug discovery and delivery, we fund pre-doctoral fellowships, postdoctoral fellowships, and faculty starter grants in those first 5 years. And I do want to make the point that if you do apply for our grant, let's say in your earlier postdoctoral work and don't achieve an award, try again. Same for our faculty starter grants and postdoctoral fellowships. We know that learning how to apply for a grant is its own process, and we're very curious to see those of you who come back. I wanted to just show you some smiling faces of some of our recent grantees. Every year we have about 400 applications, and we do award about 40 awards. And aside from the research dollars themselves, we have started this webinar series. It introduces you to concepts like writing your science in lay language and also career paths within industry. It is now my great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Stephanie Watts, who's a professor of pharmacology and toxicology at Michigan State University. And the reason I invited Dr. Watts to speak with you today is she's a former award winner #1 and served on the drug discovery committee for quite a few years. Furthermore, she's not on the committee anymore, so she's free to tell you all of her secrets. And with that, I'll pass it over to you.
All right, Amy, thank you. Can everybody hear me all right? Yes? All right, so it is such a privilege to get to be here with you today. I am a past PhRMA Foundation awardee. No, the first grant I ever wrote was to the PhRMA Foundation. This is a pre-doc, and I didn't get it because I didn't know a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk with you about in the next 15 to 20 minutes. So I understand that I have had success, and for as many successes I've had, I've probably had 4 times the amount of failure. The one thing you don't do, right, is give up on a good idea. So here we go. So know that the PhRMA Foundation really does not fund just one type of cell, tissue, disease type. And I intend to relay that idea to you by showing that the PhRMA Foundation works on the brain, works on skeletal muscle, bone, the heart, the kidney, the uterus, the liver, the bladder, you name it. Right? We have seen different systems represented in the grants that come to us. Your goal is to be able to tell us a story and argue a project, no matter what the system is, right, that makes it undeniable that the PhRMA Foundation is going to want to help you in your drug discovery or your drug delivery platform. So we're here to talk about the application process to the PhRMA Foundation, and you have 2 stages to consider, and we'll talk about them both. The first is a letter of intent I'll also call that the LOI and the application itself. You should know straight up that everything I say is really relevant to both of these pieces. A lot of this is common sense. And Amy Miller, you dare say that, yes, a lot of what I'm going to say, some of it is specific to the PhRMA Foundation, but much of it is specific to granting, right? So not only have I had the privilege of being on the PhRMA Foundation, but I've been on multiple NIH study sections, American Heart study sections and the like. I've seen a lot, I've written a lot, so I'm hoping that what I share with you today is not only relevant, but helpful to you. So this letter of intent is a stage that we began a couple of years ago. This is as we opened up this process, right, to many different types of people within the pharmaceutics pharmacology world. And we recognized that it was just too much to be able to have that many applications to look at. So we ask you to pull together two different parts of an application for this letter of intent. The first part, right, is to answer these 4 research impact questions, right? Asking them means that you really have to think about them and answer them, right? And you have to be able to do that in the written word, right? So they are, what challenges or gaps in the field are you solving? Can you say it? Right? How will your project advance the field? You should know it, and you should be able to tell somebody what that advance is. How is your project innovative? What are you doing that's different than other people? And is your innovation going to help solve problems for other people? Last but not least, how does your project fit the PhRMA Foundation's definition of drug discovery or delivery? You have to be able to answer these questions in no uncertain terms and explicitly in the words that you use, right? So that helps you think about the project as PhRMA Foundation worries about it. The second is you having about a 600-word text document, which many people have used as putting together a specific aims page. So for those of you who might have submitted a National Institutes of Health or American Heart, this is that very first page. And that first page, right, is intended to help pique the reviewer's interest so that we look at this and go, I gotta see the whole thing. That's what this letter of intent does. So let's talk about this a little bit more. So within those 4 questions that we talk about, these are some of the other things that you need to answer. You basically want to capture my attention, right? So when I was on this board, and now when I'm on study section, I might have 10 grants to read in front of me. Yours is the one you want me to remember and really know about. So you capture my attention. Right? And what I'm looking for in letters of intent or those first pages are these kinds of questions answered. Is the problem posed significant? Right? Can you give me preliminary data, real concrete evidence that says this problem, it matters, and it's something that we need to be able to solve? Can you then tell me, in point 2, is the resolution of that problem novel? Right? And here, along all the way, is where you really need to know your field. You need to understand where you fit into it, whether you are helping resolve some kind of conundrum or controversy that exists. So you need to know the problem really well to be able to say that your solution will resolve it. The third point is whether the resolution you pose of this problem is feasible. In other words, can you actually do it? And that means not just do this technically speaking, but do it in the time of the award. The fourth point is whether you can point to me what's going to come out of your work. Right? This is a really good thing to do, especially for drug delivery or drug discovery, to say we are going to come out with X, right? So you back up and figure out what you need to do to get to X. And is having that, is it going to be impactful? So this is different than being significant. This means that if I end up, you end up being successful in what you do, will it matter? Can you answer the so what question? That you've done this, and in fact, yes, it is going to be impactful because it's going to solve the problem. This last point, right, is just as important, and that is whether you, the applicant, are you suited to the work that you talked about? Right? So I'll give you this example. I am a cardiovascular pharmacologist. I love blood vessels, anything to do with them. I will never in my life be putting together a carcinogenesis grant, because people would look at it and go, she does not have the pedigree to do this. I don't have the training to do it. I don't have the experience to do it. So we are going to be looking, especially for the latter grants, where you are on your own as a research starter or you're a postdoc. Does the science that you're doing fit where you are, or is it going to help you get to where you want to be, right? So that's part of all those different LOI questions. That LOI also has your CV, has just some other pertinent information that the Pharma Foundation needs to know about, right? So here's what I'm going to suggest you do. This is an idea, right? You can take it or you can throw it away. So your LOI, that's your Erlenmeyer flask here. Your whole application, that's the round bottom flask here. And yes, I was a chem major. Because all of these things that I've just talked about in the LOI are things that are going to show that you've thought about this process. One of the ways to make sure that the LOI actually reflects your application is to write them together. You know, go back and forth between these two different things, draft that research project, and then make it easier on yourself to distill the essence of that LOI into that LOI. So that's an idea. That is certainly how I did this. And it helped me. It also helped me be truthful in terms of my answers to different questions that were around a long time ago. So let's then think about the LOI and the application. Everything I say here is relevant to both. Right? So in your application, make it clear. Right? Fussy words need not apply. You have a bunch of smart people on that review committee, and they are going to be in pharmaceutics and pharmacology and in safety toxicology. They could be in many different things, right? But we can't capture, just like any study section, all expertises. So it's important that you certainly, as point one says, use the correct words for your field, but make sure that you need to use those words and that their meaning is clear. Right? So for me, I have clearly reviewed things other than cardiovascular pharmacology. It's really helpful when people tell me how they are thinking about an issue, a term, what this means, so I understand how they're going to use it. Right? Point two is to, in that LOI and in that application, use headings and paragraphs with active titles. And here's why. That's space. You want to use it really well. So say at the beginning of a paragraph, I will tell people exactly what I want them to get from it. Right? And you have to write it true to that, but you can, rather than very passive, the history of Cameron. Well, okay, no, tell me why Cameron's important. So you can actually use the structure of your document to be able to help get some of your ideas across. Point number three pleads with you to please keep your ideas discreet and to use periods, right? So I am married to an English professor. And one of the things he corrected my writing when I started as a graduate school is to stop this going on, because you keep, a scientist, there's always disclaimers and there's always but ifs. That gets confusing, right? And you can lose people. So if you keep your ideas discreet, make those sentences declarative, and especially as point four, make sure your idea is finished in a sentence, that people get it. This, what I'm saying here, has nothing specific to do with the Pharma Foundation, but it is oh so important for getting your ideas across. So remember these different kinds of points. So using those, then you're going to build what is the content of that application. Right? And there are 5 things I want you to remember for that application. Some of them are similar to what we've already described. The first is you have to argue to me why this work is significant, right? If you can't, right, that's a sign, right? You need to be able to prove to yourself that it's significant, and that if you finish it, that in fact your work will have impact. You being able to talk about those 2 things in the same sentence is gorgeous, right? Show it to people. Use your words to say, this is how I see it. Now they can choose to agree with you and they can choose to disagree with you, but put it there on paper, right? And back it up in both instances with any kind of reference and data that you can. Right? You need to, in that content, prove that the work you're going to do is feasible. Right? So if you are inventing a new way of drug discovery, the idea of you having preliminary data to demonstrate to me that this new thing you're talking about, you really can do, right, is important. So not only is it important to technically be able to show people you can do those things so critical to the work that you propose, but that you can also do this temporally, right? These are smart people that are in the study section. And if you tell them you're going to synthesize 160 different compounds in 2 months, unless you're a high throughput facility, they know you're not going to do that. Right? Maybe you can't, but it's unlikely. Right? So you have to make it real. Right? And you're going to hear me say that word time and time again, making it real. These are people who have done research, who have mentored research, who have started their laboratories. So really think hard about what you can do in the time that you have for this grant, right? So for the research starter as a year, for a pre or a postdoc, maybe 2. Right? The fourth point here is you, right? Again, can you argue to me through the publications you have, through something we'll talk about later, your extended letter? You are the best person to be able to do this work. And for the last point, is this going to help you in your career? Yeah. One of the best things, and there are many good things about the PhRMA Foundation, is the fact that they have chosen and work hard to defend this part of science that we call pharmacology, pharmaceutics, drug delivery, drug discovery. There really is no such specific thing within NIH or American Heart, not in the way PhRMA Foundation supports. And so because of this, the people who are a part of PhRMA Foundation, they really do become a part of it. And they want to know that this is going to be able to help your world. Start your lab as a research starter grant. Postdoc, have you get that extra amount of oomph that you need to get to your own job. And a pre-doc, finish that thing called a PhD. It matters to this group of people, right? So those kinds of things have to be in your content, right? And all along the way, you're writing well, and you are organizing in a very logical way all the things that we just talked about. Your job is to link for the reviewers the premise of your work and the significance. How are you going to do it? Right? And can you tell me about alternatives? What it's going to mean if you actually do this, and then over what time you're going to do it. Right? So this seems really simple. Why, how, so what, and when. But for those of you who have already written, or those of you who are starting out writing, you know it's hard. It's hard to do this when you get down on words. So I'm going to encourage you all to start as early as you can in writing, because multiple different versions of what you do, it gets better every time. Okay? So you have a job. Okay? And in this LOI or the approach that you write, your words matter. Right? And you only have a finite amount of them. So you want to spend them well. Here's what I mean. First point, read it out loud. Yeah, but you've never done that before, have you? Take that document, read it out loud. Did you actually mean the words that you said? I do this with every grant I send in, and most of the time every paper. And I catch some doozies of things that I did not mean. And I know that I need to say another way, or it's flat out wrong, or it's a sentence that goes on for a whole minute. Read it out loud. You'd be surprised by what you catch. Okay? Use those simple declarative sentences as point 2. Point number 3 is a mantra in my laboratory. When you write, you need to say what you mean. Go straight for it. No going around the bullseye. Go for the bullseye. But then make sure that when you use those words, that you actually mean what you say. Okay? So that's where your words really matter. 4 and 5 are the same. Proofread again and again and again and again and again, because you can't believe what you miss, because you live it, you breathe it, right? You've given birth to it. Ask your colleagues to proofread. They do the same for you. You've probably already discovered this. I cannot tell you how important this is, and how many times people have seen things I did not think about until someone said something to me. So while you make yourself vulnerable, and it is humbling, do it here and now before you send the grant in. And you've likely heard that advice already. Right? So your words matter, but the figures you put in that document, they matter just as much. I am a picture thinker, right? I love words, but I also love pictures. So I use them in my papers as well as my grants, not just to show preliminary data, but to show ideas. So for your figures, you want them to be simple and meaningful, not just because they're pretty. They really need to be worth that space you're going to spend on them. That they all have legible fonts, that they have distinguishable colors, right? I learned the hard way that I think it's something like 23%, maybe less than that, of our population is colorblind. So there are certain colors that you don't put together, right, on a slide, or you don't put together on paper. In those figures, you want to make it very clear, your statistics comparisons. And the last point is the one I really want to make, is consider where you can using them as hypotheses diagram or protocol diagrams or process diagrams. And an example of that is on the right-hand side. This is something that we use as a hypothesis diagram in an investigator-driven or R01 to NIH. And in it, we're arguing that this adipokine chemarin comes from adipocytes, that chemarin interacts with its receptor, chemar23, on smooth muscle cells. And when the endothelial cell of that vessel is sick, chemarin can cause constriction, which ultimately leads to high blood pressure. I've used this, and I can't tell you how many seminars. So spending some time on things like this is not only good for seminars or talks, but good for your grants too. All right, so here's your goal. You want to make a compelling document, that LOI where people say, I got to see the rest of this. I want to know how they're going to do all these kinds of things. And then you write that application and they say, oh yeah, that's what we need to do. Okay. So some other ideas of how to do that. Okay. Before doing that, we're going to get to this extended letter. And this is something that's different about the PhRMA Foundation. I alluded to this earlier. We really want to know you. I have been fortunate enough to be a part of the PhRMA Foundation for 28 years now. I had a faculty award that no longer exists. We had a research starter grant, and that started my laboratory. Okay? So the people who review these awards want to know you and will be so happy, right, if they can know that they've done something to move you forward. So this letter is a chance for you to shine and you to really tell yourselves about yourselves. And here you have to be real. Don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Tell me who you are. Right? Tell me what's been good for you. Tell me what's been hard for you. Everybody knows science is not easy. It's downright hard sometimes. Be real and use your words. How you hope to love science, drug discovery and drug delivery, and how this award will help you. We honest to goodness read this. And it's actually one of the most fun parts we have, because we know we're funding people, not a piece of paper. The other types of letters that you have are letters of support. So here for the pre-doc and the postdoc, these may come from different professors you have, and they certainly should come from your mentor. For the research starter grant, what's so important is to have one from your department chair. And in all of these different letters, what we are looking for is true institutional and departmental commitment. Right? If we think about the research starter grant, that's going to mean space. Right? You really have got it all. You have something like a startup fund. How much is that startup fund? You are going to be protected at least X number of months before you walk into the classroom, such that you can get your research program off the ground. Right? For the postdoc and the pre-docs, here you want to have people who really do know you and who look at you and say, all right, I see this person. I see this person moving forward in the science that they're going to do, and here's what PhRMA Foundation will do for them. So be smart about how you choose the letter of intent or letters of support. All right. So here are two examples of what's worked in the past. This first is a pre-doctoral fellow entitled Parkinson's Disease Therapies Targeting GUC-Y2C. And it sounds simple, but it took hard work to get it here. This was an unmet need, and it was explained well. It was a feasible project, so it could be done, and it had support in preliminary data. There was clearly a dedicated mentor and a dedicated student as well. So all those different pieces fit. Similarly, for the research starter grant or the faculty starter grant below, harnessing natural killer cells to treat high-risk B and T cell acute lymphoblastic leukemia, the right things were there, right? This was important to the researcher. It would literally change this individual's research career. The work that came from it would have high impact, right? And the environment was clearly supportive, right? So those are some very high level ideas as to why these were successful. Right? The last things I want to share with you are some don'ts. All right, so we're going to put this in your head, and this is Stephanie says no. Okay, don't do these things. I want you to be successful. Read the directions, please. not reading directions. I am 100% serious about this. If Pharma Foundation asks for it, do it. I have been on NHLBI study section for a long time, and I'm watching senior people not read directions and have their grants do poorly because they haven't. This is not something that you want to undo your grants, so read directions. You must, in that research approach, think about all sides of what you're talking about. And here, meaning both the supportive and maybe the argumentary or the non-supportive research literature around the idea you're going to discuss. You need to know it all, whether or not it fits with what you want to do or it's against what you want to do. Know your world and how you fit into it. Number 3 is if you can't show me that some of the very important things you are going to say you're going to do, that you can't do it, that's going to make us worried, right? That you're banking everything on this thing that you can't show us you can do. So be very critical when you read your own work and say, so what would I need to see, right? If I were going to give this person money, what would they need to prove to me that I can do this, right? Please don't do jargon-filled sentences or unintelligible writing. These are smart people. We know you're smart too. Get your idea across in the simplest but correct fashion. The last part is important. The Pharma Foundation has rules about for research startup grants, how much money you can have and what type of grant you can receive that will not disqualify you for being able to do this. We've had to not look at applications in the past because people didn't read directions and understand that the thing that they had made it such that they had too much money, right, for us to consider for a research startup grant. This goes true for a pre-doc and a postdoc grant as well. If you've got funding, and list it. All right. One more slide if Stephanie says no. In that approach, tell me what you expect to see. I want to know what you think this set of experiments is going to do. And I also want to know what you're going to do when it doesn't go the way you think it did. Okay. This is probably one of the most wonderful and exasperating parts of your research approach to write. But doing it is also important because by doing it, you show people you are really thinking through your project. You're thinking it through, and any scientist worth their salt knows we are not right 100% of our time. But I'm lucky if I'm right 50% of the time, which means you have to show us that you've done this work. The second X, this is a big one. You need to know and be able to explain how the work you're going to do really fits into the Foundation's drug discovery and drug delivery program. And if you can't do that, your LOI will not fly. So really think about it. Go read the Pharma Foundation website. Know that you belong there. Last but not least is not being truthful in every regard. In this world, we have a lot of examples of people having CVs that aren't truthful, right? That claim more publications than they have or schooling that they might not have. I know how to use Google. Pharma Foundation knows how to use Google. Why lie? Right? There's really no reason to do it. But so be truthful not only in who you are, but when you are doing the science, make it real, right? Science will never, ever do you wrong. But we can do wrong by science by doing some of the things that I just described. So be truthful. And when you are, good things are going to happen. So what I can do is wish you the absolute best of luck. Here is my email. It's watts@msu.edu. As Amy said, I am not on the study section anymore, so I have no problems talking with you about any one of those types of applications. To the Pharma Foundation, to Joanne, to Emily and Amy, I want to thank you for the chance to be able to support something that means a lot to me.
Thank you, Stephanie. I enjoy your presentation very much. While you were speaking, I did take the liberty of answering some questions I think I could. There's one that I did want to kick over to you. The question is, can you include project collaborators in your LOI to emphasize cross-training potential and other resources you have access to in order to complete your project? Would you elaborate on that?
I can. So yes, right. So this is part of making the science real. Right? If that person is essential in what you need to do, they should be included in what you intend to do. That's part of your feasibility. I think their absence could be noted as not being present, and know that no one believes science is done as silos. You may have heard that before. We need one another right now, right? My lab is an own example. I probably have 8 different laboratories on this campus of MSU that I work with. They're a part of my grants, right? So the right thing to do is to acknowledge, right, where you need contributions from different places. It doesn't make you smaller by saying you have them. It makes you better by recognizing them.
Thank you. That was an excellent elaboration. So I'll go to the questions. The first ones are about pharma, so I'll tackle those.
You bet.
Why are reviewers' comments not included in the application results? We haven't done that historically. And when I joined a year and a half ago, I did come to understand that is important. So we've just started asking this year for researchers and reviewers to put comments they'd like to go back to applicants. It's on a voluntary basis, so we can't promise you'll get feedback. Also, we, Joanne, Emily, and Amy, are starting to take notes during the discussion. So if your program is discussed, we may be able to give you a hint on how to improve it in the next year. If it's not discussed, we may not be able to do that. This isn't a perfect system for us yet. It's one we're working on, and thank you for bringing it up today. All right, so can you elaborate a bit on how to think about the proposal to ensure the project is feasible within the 1-year project scope for research starter grants, but also show an exciting and impactful process that can change the field?
Oh, right. So we're not asking a whole heck of a lot, are we? Right? You have 1 year to change the field, change the world in which to do it. So I'll start with this. The people who are on this committee, they know science, right? And they know science sometimes needs to move like this, and you have to have that first step to get to the next, right? So one of the things I've been thinking about relative to this is you have to think about how you're going to pose your problem, right? So let's say you have a problem that's this big, but what you want to do is this part of it, right? Any science is going to say that's perfectly acceptable, right? If this whole thing, which might take longer, but this piece, this is essential. You got to figure out the formulation for this particular drug before it can get to here to be able to solve that particular disease. You saying it in those explicit ways, right, lets me know you are an essential piece along the path. Right? So it's you arguing your case, where you are within this. And also, to be frank, using words like, this is novel because you put it right in people's face. I say, this is new because, use those words. Right? So people, they see it and they start thinking about that. Be honest, right, about what you're able to do. And so let's say you don't think you might not quite get there. You say, well, here's where we hope to get in that year. And what's going to come after that year is this, right? So one of the things PhRMA Foundation has looked for, and Joanne, Emily, and Amy, I will count on you for correcting me if I'm wrong, is that this is going to help you launch into bigger grants, right? So moving to that R01. So let's say that first year research starter grant is that thing that lets you get that formulation of a drug that's going to be important for ultimate clinical tests. That's wonderful. Right. Amy, I don't know if you want to add to that, but that's
It's completely fair to say that in the application. And we have quite a few award winners who did use their faculty starter grants to get the data necessary for their R01. We have quite a few stories in delivery and discovery in that regard. So I will answer another couple of management questions before turning one over to you. Is it possible for us to know the ratio of LOIs? And another is, how many post-grad grants do we award? So there's a good news. There are no quotas. We don't tell the committee how to divide up the grants. They pick the best of the best with the funding level possible. With regard to the LOIs, it's the exact same thing. If the committee wants to have everyone move to a full application, they will. Every LOI is read by at least 2 reviewers. And if they disagree, we try to get them to work out, is this person invited or is this person not invited? If they cannot agree, we send it to a 3rd reviewer. And if there's 2 yeses, you move on to a full application invitation. Let's see. So another question for you is, what if the collaborator is from another university? So from the foundation's perspective, the money has to stay in the United States. But Stephanie, tell me about your experiences with that question.
So here you have to make it real. Show me that if you have someone who say is 1,000 miles away, how are you going to make it feasible? Right. So we just got done with a study session last week where every single one of these 5 universities, there were 5 universities in this grant, but they showed us how a sample was going to move through these different universities so we could understand how the work would be done. So that means they explicitly told us the process so that we could look at it and say, okay, that can work. Okay, so feasibility, right, as a part of that. So work it out ahead of time. This is where you might think of using a schematic, right? Part starts here, moves to the next university, moves to the next, and then it comes back so that they can see the process as it is. People know that work is certainly at least somewhat harder when your collaborators are at a different place. But certainly the world has gotten smaller, right? In the last couple of years. You just being honest and truthful about these kinds of things is the best way to go. If those are the right people to do the work, I wouldn't worry about having it as a collaboration.
Thank you. And how important is it for a mentor to be involved in a project? And if you don't have a mentor for the project, but you have a lot of experience or similar type of research. So would you like to address that from the 3 different categories or?
Yeah,
one?
well, so all right. So mentors are probably, I would say, most important in the pre-doctoral category, because this is the person who's teaching you how to be a PhD. They are certainly important in the postdoc, because this is a person who's going to help you get to whatever your next step is. As a research starter, what's important there is that the department has your back, right? So not having a mentor, we'd want to know more why, I think, because I mentor graduate students. I know how important they are to me and how I am to them. You showing a process by which, as a pre-doc here now, you are going to get through typically past quals, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and how you're going to learn, right, what being a scholar or a PhD is, to the point of you actually getting your PhD. Typically, part of a mentor's letter contains a plan, right, for how they are going to help you along the way. That means with writing, more about granting, about conferences, about responsible conduct and research, about all the things that you think of that a mentor should be there with you for. That's important. It could be that you might get those things in different ways outside of, say, one individual, but you're going to need to show people how that's done, right? For a postdoc mentor, I would say the same kind of thing, although the path that you would move is different. Here, it's what new techniques are you learning? How is this going to make ready for what your next start is? Are you going to do career development along the way, right? And if this is your particular interest, say industry is your interest and you want to go into a pharmaceutical company, what are you going to do that helps make you competitive for that? The research starter grant is a little bit different, because there you are a full adult at that point as a scientist, and you have to do many of these things on your own. You do need, though, to have a letter from a chair, especially, or other people who are there and have your back. So, Amy, you probably want to add to that too. You have more current experience than I do.
I think that's well said. I think when you're an independent investigator, it matters less as long as you have the resources necessary. In earlier stages, I do believe the mentor relationship with the applicant is an important consideration for the award.
It is. I want to say this, we talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
Right? When comes time, is this a good pairing? Right? Is the mentor the right person to be able to do this? Do they have success of mentoring in the past? Where have the people gone? Have they had funding in this area? Those kinds of things. So while you write the grant, we need to know that I'll use this phrase, that you're in something of a safe space for being able to do the work that you need.
Well said. So someone points out that it seems like an only limited number of researchers get the award. And does the post-doc research increase every year? I'm proud to say every cent we raise every year does go out to you. But it is true, we get about 400 letters of interest and make about 40 awards annually. That is the reality, but it's not that far off of NIH's pay lines as well. And so I think it's just a reality of this particular field. Stephanie, do you want to elaborate?
No, I mean, you're right. If you look at NCI or other institutes, sometimes their pay line is 6%. So
Yeah,
that's why you be smart about where you apply. You apply in multiple different places, and every time that you write an application, you're going to get better. So don't ever think of that as a lost or as a worthless example or exercise. It's not. You get better every single time.
and we also recognize when you've sent us an application prepared for the NIH, and that's okay. So we have a mechanism whereby if you get a large NIH award, you can accept our funding, but that doesn't mean you're counted off at all during the discussion. We know it, but that's what we're here for. These are training grants, including the application process itself is training for you. And so you don't get counted off. And if you get the NIH award, fantastic. We know you're going to take it. And if you don't, we just move on and give the money to the first alternate. So that's the other thing you may not know. We do pick alternates in every category. And so if we do have someone turn down our grant, then we just move on to the alternates within the same category.
Yeah, that's where, though, I beg you, be honest, right? You all know that there's only a finite amount of money to go around, and we want our colleagues to be successful with us. So please, when that does happen, tell the PhRMA Foundation.
Absolutely. So when reviewing a grant, do you consider the applicant's year of training? For example, the first year of postdoctoral trainee versus the 5th year.
Yeah, so we do, and I have certainly sat around that table in Washington, D.C. with all our people reviewing these grants together, and people say, why is this person asking for 2 more years when they've been in this lab for 5? Right, so you have to demonstrate, say in that example, this is worthwhile for you, and really needs to be explicit, because everybody can look at this and know that postdocs sometimes can procrastinate your adolescence as a scientist, right? So you want to move from being in grade school to being in high school and college, and then you want to graduate and you want to have a lab of your own or a job of your own. So that raises eyebrows, right? When we see things like that. Certainly for a first year postdoc, we know you're coming in and you're learning, right? So what I'd hope is we'd see the beginning of a good relationship between you and your mentor, you plotting and planning maybe what papers you'd like to be able to publish, conferences you'd like to go to, and there's very explicit acknowledgement of the fact that you're at the beginning and you're asking for PhRMA to be at the beginning with you. So I'd say yes, we do.
And I want to point out the honesty that that Dr. Watts has iterated a few times. We count. So if you say you've been in your postdoc 5 years, and we see that you've been in your postdoc for 6 years, we literally do count. And it's not us here. If it's caught by the committee, it happens every study section, actually. So I just want to point that out. Don't do it. Look at our selection criteria and please abide by it. So I wonder, another question, I wonder whether mentor's position is important, like AP or full professor.
So for us, it's having some experience, right? So let me back up. We all know you have to begin somewhere, right? And for my very first graduate student, I've written her and said, can I please have a do-over? Because I do it so much better now than I did at the beginning, but she gave me a chance. So knowing the record of a mentor is a helpful thing. Being very honest about this is our first try is also a good thing. And we have certainly had that come to the committee where it's 2 new people, but this just looks to be such a dynamite interaction of good things they're going to do for one another. People are fully supportive of it. So if you are a new assistant professor and you want to have someone put in a pre-doc, don't hesitate in doing this, right? But just make it clear that you know who you are, you know what you know, and you know what you don't know yet, and what you don't have expertise with. Some of the time, in that instance, if you're a really new mentor, that mentor will ask to have a senior mentor along with, right, to be able to say all the way along, Stephanie Watts, she's old. She's going to be my guiding post. I'm going to go to her with ideas, or she's going to be another person that my graduate student can go to. Right. Those are ideas that I've seen used. I know, Amy, what would you like to add?
I've seen it all the ways. It is discussed who your mentor is and what stage they are in, and it's just practicality. Are the resources in the lab there? Is this mentor appropriately trained to mentor a graduate student? It's all discussed, but there's no prohibition at all. Does PhRMA provide a study section for us? So if you look online, you'll see our study sections are listed online. You do have to scroll to see them all because they're all on one page right now, but we're getting a new website over the summer, so stay tuned. It'll be easier to navigate. And then how do you look at applicants who have been out of the lab due to COVID? And then visa banned. So I can't speak to visa banning because I don't understand what that means. However, the funding goes to the school and then to you. And so you have to be at a university to apply for our grants.
Yeah, so the one thing I can say about COVID is that this has certainly made a mess of research in terms of how you hold people accountable for what they say they're going to do or where they need to be. In the study sections I have watched, people have gotten pretty good grace periods for doing things. And I think the PhRMA Foundation has acted that way. You know, from here on in, I don't know if one can really lean on that as being a reason for moving slower or not doing different things. NIH is not.
So we're going to have to wrap up soon, but I will answer the following questions. The chances of an international applicant getting an award are equal to a non-international student getting an award. There is no difference. It's not even recognized half the time, unless somebody's gone through your entire bio sketch. And then let's see, does having interdisciplinary experience a positive or a negative? The PhRMA, I'm going to speak first and I'll pass it over to you. The PhRMA Foundation has a long history of funding research that's on the edge. And when I look at biomedical engineering, or if I look at what we're looking at new therapeutic modalities, all I see is interdisciplinary collaboration. And so I'd say it's a plus. Stephanie, what do you think?
I think it is too. You do, and you bring together the people, the techniques, the knowledge that you need to answer the question that you have. Right, however it's done. So I work with a mechanical engineer, and I have learned more from her in the last couple of years that we've been together than I have probably with anybody else. It's wonderful. Be smart, right? No one's expecting you to do it all. So if you have those collaborators and they help you, they're the right ones to help you approach an interdisciplinary project, that's a great thing.
Well, I want to thank you, Stephanie, for doing this webinar. I'm going to try to shoot through these last 3 questions before I conclude. So thank you very much. Well done. If your career path includes a biotech entrepreneur, put it in that application letter. We have somebody who's now in venture capital who won 2 of our awards. And so we understand smart, creative people go to interesting places. And we're not afraid to fund you. And then what's the ratio of physicians to PhDs receiving funding? We don't have a whole lot of MDs applying for funding, and that's the only reason why it's lower. There's nothing preventing you from getting an award. It's not looked down upon or promoted. And then how many alternate applicants do we have for each study section? It, again, depends on the selection committee, but there's usually a few so that we have the room to make those awards if somebody turns down our funding. So I'm going to go ahead and conclude. I'm sure you're curious when the letters of interest are due, and it's May 15th. You can also find all of the information on our awards here. Sorry, getting reoriented towards controlling the slides. I must thank all of our foundation supporters. So every cent these philanthropy companies give to us goes out to you every year. I'm very thankful for their growing support. And we too are easy to find. We're happy to answer any questions. You can reach out to any of us. And also, please do follow us on Twitter or LinkedIn. We like to highlight our former award winners. So if you look on our social media now, you'll see former award winners. And if you're curious, what we've been funding recently, please feel free to read our annual reports. You'll see exactly who we funded and what they're up to. So with that, I will conclude, and thank you very much for your time. I hope you found this valuable content.